I used to believe my life was the kind of story people quietly envied from a distance, the kind built on years of discipline, early mornings, and a steady sense of purpose that made everything feel earned rather than accidental. And for a long time I walked around convinced I had finally reached the version of myself I had been chasing since my 30s, a man with a respected business, a woman who felt like home, and a child whose laughter filled every empty corner of the house. But all of that confidence shattered in a single evening, when a conversation I was never meant to hear tore the illusion apart and exposed how fragile my sense of reality truly was. Because what I discovered that night didn't just change my relationship. It forced me to question my own judgment, my identity, and every decision I had made over the last several years. And even now, long after the dust has settled, I still wake some mornings feeling as if I'm standing in the ruins of a life I thought was permanent, trying to understand how something that felt so solid could collapse without warning, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions and a version of myself I no longer recognize, haunted by the realization that sometimes the most dangerous lies are the ones we never think to doubt. At the time everything fell apart, my name was Adrian Wells, and I was in my early 50s, living in a quiet suburban neighborhood on the edge of a busy city, where I ran a modest but successful surveillance and access control company that specialized in residential and small commercial security. A business I had built from the ground up after years of working for other people, crawling through attics, drilling into concrete, troubleshooting faulty wiring, and slowly earning a reputation for being reliable, meticulous, and honest, because I had grown up believing that a man's word was the only currency that truly mattered, something my father repeated so often it became a personal law. And for most of my life I tried to live by it, thinking that if I treated others fairly, life would eventually return that same loyalty. But I never imagined how cruelly ironic it would feel to spend decades protecting other people's homes, while failing to protect my own heart from the one betrayal I never saw coming. The kind that doesn't announce itself with anger or chaos, but arrives quietly, wrapped in familiarity, hiding behind a face you trust more than your own reflection. Before everything changed, I had known Serena for more than a decade, first as a friend, then as something deeper. But for many years our connection was built on comfort rather than desire, meeting through mutual acquaintances at a casual neighborhood cookout long ago when both of us were still healing from broken marriages and guarded hearts. And what drew me to her wasn't physical attraction or excitement, but how easy it felt to exist in the same space, how our conversations never felt forced, how silence between us felt natural instead of awkward. And for years we kept our lives separate yet gently intertwined, helping each other move furniture, sharing dinners when one of us had a long day, offering companionship without expectations. And I believed that slow, respectful friendship was proof of emotional maturity, never realizing that comfort can sometimes make people careless. Because when you feel safe, you stop questioning the foundation beneath your feet, trusting that what you see is the full truth. Everything shifted on a cold weekday evening when I was returning home from a long installation job at a high-end residence where the owner had changed his mind repeatedly, dragging the project out until after dark, leaving me exhausted and eager to collapse on my couch with a quiet drink, when Serena called unexpectedly, her voice trembling in a way I had never heard before, asking if she could come over because she didn't trust herself to be alone. And something in her tone stirred a protective instinct in me that overrode every hesitation, because I had always seen her as strong and composed, not the kind of woman who asked for help unless she truly needed it. And when she arrived with tear-stained cheeks and shaking hands, I knew whatever she was carrying was heavier than she could manage alone. And without realizing it, I stepped into a moment that would forever alter the direction of my life. That night, as she poured out her story about feeling trapped and powerless in her workplace, describing subtle threats disguised as encouragement, unwanted attention framed as opportunity, and the unbearable weight of choosing between dignity and financial survival, something inside me shifted, because I had always seen the world in clean lines of right and wrong. But her pain blurred those boundaries. And as we sat talking until the early hours of morning, sharing fears we had buried for years, the space between us slowly transformed into something neither of us had planned. And when she asked to stay close, not wanting to feel alone, I agreed without understanding the consequences. Because at that moment, all I wanted was to protect her from a world that had failed her, never imagining that my own world would soon collapse under the weight of secrets hidden far deeper than anything she had shared that night. The weeks that followed felt surreal, like stepping into a version of my life that had been waiting quietly for years. And while we moved carefully, aware of the fragile history between us, there was a sense of inevitability in the way our relationship unfolded, as if all the years of friendship had been slowly guiding us toward this point. And I allowed myself to believe that sometimes life rewards patience, that perhaps this was the chapter I had been waiting for. A chance at connection built on trust and mutual respect rather than impulsive desire, and I felt proud of how naturally everything seemed to fit, never questioning whether the timing was too perfect, too convenient, or too sudden to be entirely honest. Not long after, my phone rang while I was finishing a routine service call, and when Serena told me she was expecting a child, the words echoed in my mind as if spoken in another language, because I had spent years convincing myself that fatherhood was no longer possible for me. And suddenly the future I had written off was standing directly in front of me, demanding courage, commitment, and a willingness to step into the unknown. And although fear and uncertainty swirled through my thoughts, something deeper, something instinctive, pushed me forward, because despite all the reasons to hesitate, I wanted to believe that this unexpected path was meant for me, that perhaps life was offering redemption for the mistakes of my past. And without fully understanding the weight of that promise, I chose to embrace it with everything I had. From that moment on, my life became a careful balance between work, preparation, and emotional investment, reading books, saving money, rearranging rooms, and imagining the kind of father I wanted to be. Because I believed that responsibility wasn't just about providing financially, but about building a sense of safety and belonging that a child could grow into. And as I watched Serena's body change and listened to her hopes for the future, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't known since my younger years, thinking that perhaps love really could be rebuilt after loss, that trust could grow stronger through shared vulnerability, and that sometimes the most meaningful connections emerge from unexpected places. When the baby arrived, something inside me shifted in a way I still struggle to explain, because holding him felt like anchoring myself to the world, a promise made without words, a silent agreement that no matter what happened, I would protect him, guide him, and give him a life rooted in stability. And in those early months, even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm me, I felt fulfilled, convinced that I was finally living the life I was meant to have. A family formed not by tradition or convenience, but by choice and devotion. And I believed that love alone could sustain us through anything. As time passed, the rhythm of our days settled into something comforting, filled with laughter, routines, and shared dreams, and I allowed myself to believe that the past was behind me, that the struggles I had endured were simply stepping stones toward a future built on honesty and connection. And when I eventually asked Serena to marry me, it felt like a natural continuation of the life we had already begun, a declaration that what we had built together was worth protecting. And I stood confident in that decision, never imagining that beneath the surface of our happiness lay a truth capable of destroying everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and myself. The night I accidentally learned the truth felt unreal, as if the air itself had thickened around me, because I had only meant to come in through the side entrance to avoid waking the house, not realizing that two familiar voices drifting through the kitchen would freeze me in place, their words slow and heavy like stones sinking into my chest. And when Serena confessed that the child I believed was mine was never biologically connected to me, I felt something inside my body shut down completely. as though my mind refused to accept the meaning of what I was hearing, because the life I had built, the sacrifices I had made, the future I had carefully planned, all of it was suddenly revealed to be constructed on a foundation of silence and deception. And I stood there unable to move, unable to breathe, while the weight of their conversation crushed everything I thought was real, forcing me to confront the terrifying realization that love does not always protect you from betrayal. And sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who know exactly how to hide the truth until it is too late. I spent the hours that followed wandering through empty streets and sitting alone in my car, staring at my reflection in the windshield while my thoughts spiraled between denial and rage, replaying every moment of the last few years, searching for signs I had missed, clues that might have warned me, and yet finding nothing but memories I had trusted. Because when someone lies consistently and convincingly enough, the truth becomes invisible, and as dawn approached, I realized that the only way forward was to face the reality I had been avoiding, even if it meant destroying the life I had been preparing to celebrate. Because living inside a lie felt more unbearable than standing alone in the wreckage of honesty. The days leading up to what was supposed to be my wedding felt like torture disguised as routine, smiling through conversations, approving decorations, pretending to care about music and flowers while carrying a secret that threatened to tear everything apart. And when I finally confirmed the truth through evidence that could not be denied, I felt hollow rather than angry, because grief does not always arrive as tears or shouting but sometimes as numbness, a quiet emptiness that spreads through every part of you, leaving behind the realization that nothing you planned will ever exist. And when I canceled the ceremony, watching months of preparation dissolve in a single phone call, I understood that closure rarely comes gently, and sometimes you must create your own ending even when it leaves you standing alone. Confronting Serena was not the dramatic release I had imagined, because there was no satisfaction in seeing her cry, no victory in hearing her explanations, only the heavy truth that fear had guided her decisions. And while I could understand her reasons, I could not forgive the consequences, because love built on deception is not love at all but a fragile illusion. And when I asked her to leave, watching her walk away with the child I had raised as my own felt like losing a part of my soul. Realizing that grief does not ask permission before it settles inside you, and that sometimes letting go hurts more than holding on. The legal battle that followed felt like being judged for a crime I did not commit, as lawyers dissected my life and reduced my love to paperwork and signatures. And when the first ruling declared me responsible for a child who was never mine, I felt betrayed by a system that claimed to protect fairness while ignoring the truth. And yet I refused to accept that injustice as my fate, because surrender would mean accepting a story that was never mine to carry. And so I fought, not for revenge, but for the right to reclaim my own life. Months passed as the appeal slowly moved through the courts, and during that time, I learned how loneliness can exist even in crowded rooms, how silence can echo louder than any argument, and how rebuilding yourself requires more than time, because it demands honesty with the parts of yourself you once ignored. And when the ruling was finally overturned, I felt relief mixed with sadness, because although the chains had been removed, the scars remained, reminding me that freedom does not erase memory. Starting over in a new place, I found myself learning to trust again, cautiously opening my heart while setting boundaries I never knew I needed, because pain teaches lessons no book ever could. And though the road ahead still feels uncertain, I no longer fear being alone, understanding now that strength comes not from avoiding loss, but from surviving it. Even now, when I hear laughter or see a child holding a parent's hand, I feel a quiet ache, a reminder of what was and what can never be again. Yet I carry those memories not as wounds, but as proof that my love was real, even if the story itself was built on lies. And I choose to believe that honesty will guide me forward, because the truth, no matter how painful, is the only foundation strong enough to hold the life I am still creating.